Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast with myself, Laz Michaelides, and your co-host on the screen opposite me, Mr. Felipe Amorim. How you doing, bro?
All good, bro. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well, keeping well here. Welcome to new listeners and new viewers. We are re-energizing and revitalizing our YouTube channel, which is why you can see our gorgeous faces if you're watching this on YouTube. We're going to put in a lot more effort to the YouTube, guys. So every episode that you hear is going to be on YouTube. If you don't like sitting and listening things on your car speaker or on your headphones and you want to get a bit of a visual thing going on, come to YouTube. And YouTube viewers, if you're sat here, and you don't have time to sit and watch the video and you want to do it on your journey to work, go and check out the podcast, which is on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and all the other stuff like that. So welcome to any new viewers or listeners.
I always thought I had a good face for radio, but now everything's on YouTube now, isn't it?
The best, I think you should just wear your Chewbacca t-shirt every week, because then you can just do the comparison, right? So for anyone who is new tuning in, what we do is we talk about classic albums and classic bands and all in the life of rock and roll, some topics. You know, we're both pro musicians who've toured the world and played with numerous different bands and artists, and so we just talk all things rock and roll. But the main aim of this podcast and this show is to basically remind everyone of all those albums from days gone by that we think you need to check out. Whether you're a 60-year-old who's heard it but hasn't listened to it in 20 years, or if you're 15 years old and you're getting into the old music that your parents used to like or whatever, this show's for you, because we're going to take you right through the history books, all the way from the 40s, 50s, all the way through to modern day, checking out the classic albums and bands that we think are worth your time. So welcome, and let's get started. So today we're going to be doing a classic album. I mean, I just said it, they're all classics that we do, aren't they, really? But we're going to be doing London Calling by The Clash. Now, this is an album that you chose, Felipe. So do you want to tell people why did you choose? Why did you put this on the list?
Well, it's kind of special for me now that I live in London. There's a lot of references to life in London and life in the UK in general, isn't it? Which wasn't a thing for me back in the day when I first listened to The Clash and when I first listened to it. The main reason why I wanted to talk about it is because my earliest memory of this album was a Rolling Stone magazine kind of 100, the best 100 rock albums, that kind of, those lists that everyone disagrees with. Because obviously you can always mention which albums are the most important in rock and roll history, but it's really, really hard to actually decide on the top 10 or top 5. But anyway, on that list there was London Calling, and I didn't actually know the album by then, but the cover was so remarkable. So like when I knew that was an Elvis Presley album, that they kind of nicked the font and the colors. Complete different picture, and that picture is so rock and roll. Like so my first kind of interaction with the album was just a picture of the cover, and then now, like, researching about it, I figure out that the photographer who took that picture didn't want it to be used by the band, because she said it wasn't good in terms of lighting. It was a bit blurry or whatever. It wasn't the best picture. I actually want to double check the information, because I think that was in New York, the Palladium in New York, in September 1979.
Brilliant.
So the photographer, what is her name? Penny Smith. So she said she didn't want it. She really didn't want it, because it's not my best picture, this and that. But it captures such a great rock and roll moment. A bass player is smashing his bass. Apparently, he was unhappy with the bouncers at the venue, who told people should never stand up during the gig.
Oh God! And a punk gig, that's not acceptable.
Exactly. That's not rock and roll.
No.
Well, breaking your bass at the end of the gig, that's rock and roll. That bass is now in the Museum of London. Yeah. After being exposed at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland. So it has become a museum Objective.
Historic,
Really
yeah.
interesting.
Fantastic stuff. Well, I'll give what I do normally do is I normally give some quick fire details about the album just so that everyone knows, so the basic details. So the name is London Calling. The artist is The Clash. It was released on the 14th of December 1979 and it was recorded in the months prior, August to November of 79. Genres you'd associate with it would be punk rock, post-punk and new wave. It's 65 minutes long and the producer was Guy Stevens. And to kick off before we get into the album, I've actually got a quiz for you, Felipe.
Oh wow! Right away.
Let's go. I've got 3 questions. Right.
Right.
Question 1: which song was left off of the album's sleeve and why?
It's the last song, "Training in Vain."
That's the one. Yeah. Do you know why?
Because they finished the song after the sleeve was ready, so it's not listed.
Yeah.
So some people actually thought that song was kind of a hidden song, a hidden track,
Okay.
but it wasn't. It was
Oh
just,
my God, we found this track. We found another track.
it was just not listed.
Yeah. Question 2. When rehearsing for the album, the band had an afternoon and an evening rehearsal. But what 2 things did they do every day in between the rehearsals?
They played football, and the other one, I don't know. I know they played football in between rehearsals. I don't know.
That's right. And what did they do after the football?
Cup of tea.
No, what's the other British thing to do?
After football, watch telly. No,
It's like the tea, but think different.
they would go to a pub.
Yes.
Yes.
There
So basically, okay. So the routine for the rehearsals was like rehearsal in the morning,
Yeah.
good way to start the day, and then play football, very British.
Yeah.
Go to a pub, even more British, and then go back to the studio and rehearse again.
That's it. That's exactly it. Well, what a life. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Well done, man. 2 out of 2 so far. And the final question: how did The Clash get around CBS's demands of the way the album should be released?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I know the label didn't want a double album.
Yeah. So how did they get around? How did The Clash get around that? Do you know?
I don't know what they did, to be honest.
Okay. Shall I tell you?
No.
They released a single album, which was the first half, with a bonus 7-inch that then became a 12-inch bonus with 9 bonus songs. So they said to the people, they said, listen, let's do this album and then we'll just do a little bonus 7-inch with 3 songs. Okay, then let's make it 5 songs. Actually, let's go 12-inch. Let's make it 8 songs. Actually, we're going to make it 9. So that's how they got around it. I mean, very clever, very cheeky, very The Clash. But yeah, that's it. So yeah.
Wait a minute. So I got 1.5 questions out of 3, right?
Yeah,
so
well, no, 2.5. 2.5.
Oh, 2.5.
Yeah, well done, man. Well done. All good. So let's jump into the album because I'm sure, obviously, we've both got lots to say about it. Now, an interesting place to start would be that from their previous album was called Give 'Em Enough Rope, which came out in 1978, and it was very traditional and English punk. Then in early 1979, they started touring around the world, and mainly the USA. And the oddest thing is the kind of support bands that were supporting them on the road. Do you know about this?
I know Bo Diddley was supporting them.
Bo Diddley and Sam and Dave. These rock and roll soul artists. What are they doing supporting an English punk band? I just found it really odd and interesting.
And apparently The Clash wanted those guys on the road with them because they wanted...
Is that true? Wow.
Yeah, they wanted to make a statement about we're not a punk band anymore.
Yeah. Brilliant stuff. Well, because of that, because they toured so relentlessly with these other artists, they became influenced by the music. They started hearing, as we hear this so often, don't we? The U2 episode, they went to America and Bono started sort of feeling his blues and Irish heritage come back. And they just had this plethora of new music that was being put onto them through the tour. And what happened is they ended up... when they were starting writing this album, they got writer's block. They really struggled to come up with any new punk songs. And so they started messing around and jamming in the rehearsal room, bringing in those influences of the R&B, the reggae, the soul, the rock and roll stuff. And that's where the writing process for London Calling began.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because they actually went to the rehearsal. Okay, they were having a bit of a clash,
Yeah, there you go.
with the record label, regarding, contracts and management and all this stuff, and they really wanted to do things their own way. How many of the albums we're reviewing that have that story? How many of those great albums start with a band not having a good time with the management or label and wanting to do things their own way, which is rock and roll, isn't it? That's like rock and roll is that freedom. It's like, I want to do things the way I want to do them, and I just don't want the label to get in the way, or producers or whatever. So they, as I said, they had writer's block, so they had nothing done until the moment they got into the studio, because it's normal for songwriters to keep writing stuff, and just have loads of songs or parts of songs to work on. So you go to a studio and say, look, I've got this riff, I've got these lyrics, whatever. They had nothing. So they went to a rehearsal room, as I said, that like really relentless rehearsing, drinking, playing football routine.
Yeah, sweating from the match, drunk from the pub.
Exactly. Without actually having any songs from the beginning. So apparently the second song, Brand New Cadillac, which is one of my favorites on the album, they were using it as a warm-up song. So they started the rehearsals playing that riff and warming up, and that became a song. So that again takes us back to that moment in time when every rock band would be playing together all the time, rehearsing, writing songs as a band, not as individual songwriters who happen to be in a band. And I think this is the most exciting way of writing music, and my favorite rock songs were written like that.
Yeah. They are. I mean, you mentioned Brand New Cadillac. Did you know it's actually a cover by a guy called Vince Taylor?
All right. I didn't know.
Yeah.
So they were using it as a warm-up song. Interesting.
Well, there's two covers on this album.
Yeah.
The other one's near the end. It's Revolution Rock, which is the original by Danny Ray. For new viewers and listeners, anytime, what we have is, if you see at the bottom of your show notes, this would be on YouTube and in the podcast, we got a link to a playlist. Now that takes you guys to my Spotify, where I make playlists with the album that we're talking about, and any other songs that we mention will be added in, so you can have a listen. If we compare it to a song, you're going to hear the original, you're going to hear the comparison, and it's all there for you guys. So check the show notes and the YouTube description for that playlist. So yeah, as you said, Felipe, they brought two songs in that they were enjoying playing in their downtime, enjoying playing in the rehearsing, and that they felt was actually beginning to shape the rest of the album.
So those two covers were the first ones to be recorded, I imagine, because
you would.
Apparently, Brand New Cadillac was the first one that they recorded start to finish.
True.
And if I'm not wrong, most songs were done in a couple of takes.
Yeah, they did, which is unusual. Well, it's not unusual, but it's interesting, because it sounds like a very polished album playing wise, doesn't it?
It does, especially for the guitars, right? When you listen to the guitars, the two different guitars, the tones and the phrasing and the playing is actually really well arranged, and that's one thing that for me really sets them apart from the punk movement. I love punk music, I really do, but sometimes
we've never discussed it.
I love it. I love playing it. I like bands like Green Day, Ramones. I really enjoy that, if you can consider all those guys
definitely,
punk.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not that familiar with Sex Pistols, but I think they're good, really good. But the thing is, punk is famous for the kind of music that people who are not great musicians can play, which is not really a fair statement.
No, it isn't.
But what is fair to say there is, as a rule, punk is very simple.
Yeah.
Few chords, arrangements that don't tend to be long or clever, and the Clash simply broke all those rules. I think they just wanted to be a band. They didn't want it to be a punk band. So I have a question for you. Do you consider them more punk or new wave?
Bro, this is really interesting, and I'm sure you want a quick answer from me, but actually what we can do is we can go down a sort of rabbit hole with this, because I had put off listening to this album for a while, and it's not like it came on, it's not like it was on my to listen to list, and I just I don't fancy it. Whenever I saw it in the lists, and I see the top 100, 500 greatest albums list, I put them all in this playlist that I can listen to. And when it came to it, I just saw it and I was like, oh, do you know, I don't fancy it because I don't like punk, really. There's punk I do like. You know, we did the Green Day review a few episodes ago. I enjoyed that. But in general, I do not like punk. And I'm not crazy about 70s punk. So when I saw a punk album, arguably the most famous punk album of all time, released in 1979 by one of the most famous punk bands, I was just like, no, I don't think this is going to be for me. London Calling is a fantastic song, and I actually like that a lot, even before I listened to this album. And if I'm being honest, I think that's the only punk song on the album.
Wow.
I think
Man,
you
do you
look,
know what? Do you know what? This album's got 19 songs, right?
yeah.
I've got the list with me. I'm running through it because I want to see if I can prove you wrong.
Well, here, right. I'm Not Down. There's a little things like in song 17, I'm Not Down. There's a little metal gallop. So you got to think heavy metal's been going for about 9 years at this point, and in it you hear the rhythm, dun 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 dun, which again that's a little complex for punk.
Yeah.
It's punky, but that's still way more coming from metal. So I'm Not Down, I thought was punky. And honestly, bro, that's really the only ones I really have that I can think of as punk. So for me, you're going to hear it in my monologue, but I think this is the punkiest non-punk album ever because basically what I'm going to say now, I'll sum up my thoughts on it. The attitude, performance, lyrics, energy, passion is all 100% punk, but the music I feel is not. I feel, and this is going to be my big reveal later in the episode, may as well do it now. I hear so much Britpop.
Mm-hmm.
I hear, for me, this could be the album that started Britpop. You listen to
Lost in the
songs,
supermarket.
that's just like Pulp, isn't
That's
it?
Pulp.
Year
Yeah. But
3000.
like years before them, right?
Yeah, year 2000. Spanish
But
Bombs.
I'm saying it's like Pulp years before Pulp came about.
Yeah,
That's what
absolutely.
I'm
Yeah,
saying.
but it
It's
reminded me of the
Britpop.
song Pulp Year 2000.
Yes, it does.
The
It does.
hi hat, the
Yeah.
up in the year, just so
Even the melody sounds a bit like
the
that. So
melody. You
maybe
got
Pulp took the
songs.
idea from them.
You got songs like Hateful, with that was light and upbeat, keyboard sound, very produced. You got Spanish Bombs, which is quite Britpoppy, with he's speaking the foreign language in Spanish. We got that quite a bit in Britpop. What else have we got? The Card Cheat, I thought was very Britpoppy. And yeah, just a few others really. It just really felt, and the last song, Train in Vain, really reminded me of Mbop by Hanson. But I just really heard a lightness to it. When you think of punk, and rightly so, you think aggression, you think speed, you think political lyrics, which this album does do. I'm sure we'll get into that later. You think dissonance, unagreeableness, unpleasantness, be it in the way he shouts, the guitar notes, the production. When I hear punk, I think generally unpleasantness. That's the main thing I think about. Yet this album was in fact very, very pleasant to listen to. The chord progressions were lovely. The melodies were great. Some of the things like the horn arrangements.
Yeah.
The horn arrangements on some of these songs were
Which
fantastic.
other punk band would use a horn section,
That's
right?
it, yeah, none. Like I can't think of any. And so, yeah, that was my headline thing for the show. Is that for me, this is the first step of Britpop happening.
Interesting.
And I haven't. Just to add quickly, I haven't done my research into Britpop yet. For those who have listened before, I've studied quite extensively the history of heavy metal and hard rock music, but I haven't really delved further yet. And I can't say, maybe there is an album in 1975 that could be called the first Britpop album, whatever. But to me, and from my listening experience, this is the first and earliest album that I think could be ground zero for Britpop.
Wow, that's a very interesting statement. That's something I couldn't see this coming. That's interesting.
Long live rock and roll podcast, surprising you since 2021.
Definitely. Yeah, one thing for me is, some styles are really evident in the album, right? Yeah. Reggae and ska, that's like really, really evident throughout the album. There's loads of rockabilly, which is early rock and roll and country. you can hear that on the grooves. You can hear that, and the song "Jimmy Jazz" is essentially jazz.
It is, yeah.
Because the drummer had a jazz background, which is unusual for punk.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. I think if you isolate the vocals, right? Technically, the vocals are not polished. Let's put it like that. They're not.
Yeah, agreed.
They like very punk vocals. If you isolate the vocals and the lyrics, maybe that's where you can find the essence of punk in
Definitely.
them.
Yeah.
But the musical ability is like, the musicianship is really, really high level there. So they play really well. All the arrangements are clever, are well thought. So that really sets them apart from any other punk band.
I think, and I completely agree. Just looking at my notes, the other one that I thought was actually says feels like the most punky one on the album was Coca-Cola for me. Just to add to that,
which is not about the drink.
No, you mentioned ska, and something really interesting is that we had this ska revival beginning at the end of the 70s and the early 80s with bands like Madness and the Specials coming out and really mixing this reggae with rock music, essentially. And the Specials released their first album in 1979, a few months before this one. And I found it really funny that the first ska song on this album, track 5, called Rudy Can't Fail, and the Specials on their first album has a song called A Message to You, Rudy.
Oh.
Do you know the one? A message to you, Rudy.
Right, so this song.
And it's very ska. So I just found it interesting. I wonder if there was a little... I don't know, a little homage paid between the bands of making a ska song with the name Rudy in. I've got no idea why. But
they say that the song. Well, I found the information I found about this. The song revolves about Rudy, who is a part of the Rude Boys, a '60s Jamaican subculture that become popular in the United Kingdom.
So
apparently, those guys like to challenge the social norms and like one of the things they used to do is to drink beer for breakfast. So and Joe Strummer said, I got a quote from Joe Strummer saying, I wrote Rudy Can't Fail about some mates who were drinking brew for breakfast. They think nothing of it. Me, I'm past the stage where I can drink brew for breakfast, but not every day, and that's made me notice them. I thought it was a hell of a way to start a day. So that's adds to the story, doesn't it?
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Like as we said, we've got a few ska songs now. You've got Revolution Rock. You've got the Coca-Cola, which although I said was quite punky, I also thought it was pretty sky. Wrong and Boyo. I mean, the intro actually sounds like it could be the band. It's very Americana for the first minute, but then after that it goes into a bit of madness, bluesy, scarry stuff. Now, one that I was going to say ska, but I'm not going to go with this, is the song Guns of Brixton, which to me is out and out reggae. Because if you listen, it really, really reminded me of a song called, I think the bass and the music comes from a song called Harder They Come by Jimmy Cliff.
Yeah, there's a reference to it, doesn't it?
There was, but also, for me, lyrically, there's a song by Bob Marley called Burning and Looting, and we'll put that in the playlist again, guys, which is about protesting the regime and burning and looting in order to get your message across. And I felt that the lyrics in the Guns of Brixton were probably the most political of the whole album. Check this out. You can crush us, you can bruise. You can crush us, you can bruise us, but you'll have to answer to the Guns of Brixton. That's pretty deep when you think about it. And I think this is an anti-police... Yes, it is, because it's about the anti-police riots in Brixton in the 1970s, 1971, I believe. And I just felt that was really, really deep. For a popular album, again, we're only saying it's popular because that's what we're hearing from it, the Britpop and stuff. Yeah. In the end, they're still a punk band, aren't they? Still writing punky lyrics.
Well, the song...
Undoubtedly are punk lyrics.
Yeah, the song Clamp Down also has like references to the oppression of government. And basically what, some critics say that they were reflecting on the fact that punk is always questioning capitalism, and they kept doing that during this album. But the alternative is a stronger government, which they think is really bad as well.
Yep.
So basically, they're not giving you a choice. They're not giving you a way out of you know, any big issues in society. It's just like saying, well, capitalism's full of shit, but also giving more power to the government is not great, as seen by extreme police intervention in people's lives and all that stuff. So how much of those themes are still like still resonate with what's going on in the world today, or in many different countries today? Not necessarily in the UK to the same extent, but
Well, I think you have to.
maybe.
Yeah, you have to look, and something that makes albums timeless can also be the lyrical content. I mean, I say not. I was about to say 9 times out of 10, but that's just for me. 9 times out of 10 for me, what I love to hear in a past album is something that could still be considered great today, whether be it chord progressions, melodies, production, all that sort of stuff. That for me constitutes a classic album. But for some people, undoubtedly, lyrics are going to matter. And if certain, you've got to think, punk movement was so important in giving young people of the 70s an outlet and a voice. It became more, the giving young people an outlet in the 80s became more towards heavy metal. In the 90s, it was more grungy. But in the 70s, it was most definitely punk, because the Beatles were doing it in the 60s with their lovely suits and everything. But the 70s had punk, and this was the outlet that young people had to be able to align themselves with a cause. And I think for people who grew up with this album, for teenagers who grew up with this album and who the lyrics probably meant a lot to, it is going to be timeless, isn't it? The lyrics are going to mean the same thing to you today as it did back in 1979. And that could be either because of your own government or because of foreign governments.
Yeah. Well, there's always, so I think history always repeats itself, right?
Yep.
So parts of those lyrics are going to be, they're going to sound like they're talking about this day and age. They're going to sound like they just written the album. One thing I like, I really want to talk about is the fact that they open the album with London Calling, which I think is the best song in the album.
I agree.
It's the only real punk song in the album, although what makes the album special is that they go away from punk. But this song is so iconic, is so well played, well written. There's a couple of things I want to say about it, and I want to ask you a question about it as well.
Of course.
So it's, for me, this song is a statement of rock and rollness and the rebel behavior, in a certain way. It swings and rocks, but it's dirty and dark as well. So because of the lyrics, and it's interesting. There's a swing to it. It's a shuffle feel. It's a triplets based, which is not like straightforward rock.
Yeah,
it's still very punk and still very very dark. And I don't know if it's a call for a change or if it's just like acknowledging that that's the end of an era or things are not going well, whatever it is. But Joe Strummer, again, he said in an interview in 1988 to Melody Maker magazine, he said, "I read about 10 news reports in one day calling down all variety of plagues on us." So basically, he was telling that the news, they were all about making you feel scared and fear the worst is coming, and it's like as he said, all variety of plagues. And I think the news haven't changed at all. It's all about like, if we scare people, they're going to keep reading because they want to know if it can get worse. And if you keep giving them more and more things to be scared about, they're going to keep buying. Nowadays, it's more about keep clicking, right? Oh, I'm scared. Who died today? Or who's going to die tomorrow? What kind of event is going to bring the end of the world? I'll tell you this, and I'm not going to get into this too much, but since I was a child, really, in school, which means before you were born, I've been listening to
for new listeners and viewers. I am about 11 years younger than Felipe, so
exactly.
Carry on, please, sir.
which makes me old as fuck. It's good because you can say the F word as many times as you want on this show. Sorry if you don't want to listen to it. But so since I was a young child, I was listening to teachers and TV presenters telling us that, there's going to be a climate catastrophe or there's going to be a World War III, right? I'm kind of still waiting for those events. Are they getting any closer?
Yeah.
It might be true, but it was almost like you need to live in constant fear. And I think the whole idea of the song London Calling is to say, this is what they're telling you. And I have the feeling that the album gets lighter as it moves towards the end. It feels like it's more cheerful at the end. It's more optimistic, and it's more because there's loads of references to these events and the dark side of life in a big city from the beginning. But it gets lighter, it gets more sarcastic, more fun, more clever as it goes along. And I think when you get to the end of the album, you're feeling better than you're feeling at the beginning. That's one of the best things about the album, in my opinion.
That's a fantastic point, man. That's absolutely brilliant because it does. And in the first sort of 5 tracks, you're really bouncing around because you've got the punky one, then you go to rock and roll, then you go to the jazz, then you go to the Brit poppy one, then you go to the ska. So it's a bit of a mishmash. And then the album kind of refines, doesn't it? After you get through those first 5, it refines into a much more uplifted album. Now, it's interesting because everything, what you just said about the album is how I feel about the song. A lot of it is so minor and dissonant. And for anyone who's not aware what the word dissonant means in music, it's where you're playing 2 notes and they don't sound nice together. That it creates an unpleasant sound, not nice to the ear. And you hear this a lot in heavy metal. You might hear it in jazz as well. Now, the word dissonant can be associated with minor, darkness, sadness, etc. So throughout London Calling, Felipe, as you said, I hear this sadness, I hear this dissonance, I hear this darkness, and then it changes. It changes in the song several times because he's describing everything that you said, the misery, the sadness, the darkness in his life. And having lived in London and being born in London, I'll tell you now, having been born there, lived there for about 6 years whilst I was studying, when I think of going and living back there personally, I don't want to do it because I've acclimatized to the countryside now. I like living here. I like my fields and my walks. Yeah. But you cannot ever take London out of the man or the woman, depending on who you are. Yeah. There is something inherently homely about London, especially if you've been born there. And there's a lot wrong with London as well, prices, all this sort of stuff. But when you think about all the negative stuff, it gets overridden when you think of the London Eye, Big Ben, and all that stuff. And I think the same in the song, because there's one moment in the song where it changes from being sad, minor, and dissonant to pleasant, major, and consonant, which is the opposite of dissonance. Yeah. And you've got him saying all the minor stuff until I live by the river. And that moment is when it gets happy. The song changes for 1 second or 4 seconds, whatever. But he's talking about the sadness, and then and then he's like, here's all the sad shit. No problem. Do you know why it's not a problem? Because
I live by the river.
Live by the river. And I think that's just fantastic.
And that alone is a reason to be happy.
Oh my God. But that's the point, isn't it? You can complain all you want about London. You can, and I know London in this song is a metaphor for the governments and all that sort of stuff, but it doesn't matter because you live by the river, man. You live in London. What's better than that? One of the best cities in the world. And I just found that so interesting that, we get this one taste of happiness in that song. And it's when he's saying that he lives by the river.
Yeah. And the melody is so well written. It leads you to that part. And it's kind of, it really hits you when it gets to that point and says, I live by the river. And I had the same feeling when I was listening to it again. Now understanding the lyrics, when I was younger and listening to that, I didn't understand. And it does make it feel like there's some hope. And it's not like hope that this is an interesting thing. It's not hope that the world is going to get better, or governments are going to get better, or all the problems that we see in the news are going to end. It's just like, I live by the river. Or it's just like there's some elements in daily life that can make you happy. There's love, there's nice places to go, there's people to spend time with, and I think there's a lot of it. And one thing I asked you to do, in case you haven't done, was to watch the video, wasn't it, Lars?
Yeah.
The video for this song. And
I'm going to put the link in the show notes for everyone. I didn't listen. You said just watch the London Calling video clips. I didn't know which one exactly, but I did put the video on and I sort of hopped through it just in case that's what you wanted me to
yeah,
watch.
is it
I've seen it.
was the one of them playing it about to see a pier, right?
Yeah.
So that calls for a segment.
Go for it.
How rock and roll is that? Because you have four-piece band, two guitars, bass, and drums, without one lead singer, and it got two lead singers.
Yes.
Playing, they on a pier at night, playing their instruments, and it's rainy at some point in the video. I don't know if it's raining throughout the whole video, but you can see the rain when there's a shot just on this from the side of the drum kit. You can see the rain, and it's just that they play on a pier in the dark, and there's nothing. There's no actors. There's no special effects. It's just a band playing. And I think it's a cheap video. So, how rock and roll is that video of a band in London playing at the pier, singing about London, singing about life in the city, and it's the dark, miserable London weather. Kind of.
Well, sometimes less is more, isn't it, in terms of video making? Some of the best videos can be something where actually not much is going on, but what is going on is vitally important. So, how rock and roll is that? Again, for new viewers and listeners, we do these. These are one of several segments we do where we ask how rock and roll is it, describe the action, and then we rate it out of 100. So that act in itself is pretty rock and roll. You'd put it high 70s, early 80s, but then you have to consider the song that the music video is for is as important and relevant. So I'm going to hit this with a solid 88. Very rock and roll. And the song as well, like as we've just spent 5 minutes going on about it, so don't need to say it again, but the song matters as much as the video, and it is fucking incredible. Love that song.
When the song is good, the video is just an excuse to listen to the song again. It's not, exactly. I think they knew they didn't need much for that. It's like, this is a fantastic song. Let's just picture a band in London and that's it. Play.
Literally, less is more, literally.
Yeah. I'll never go to that pier with the same feeling again now, because I don't remember watching this video back in the day or any moment until I actually did my research for this episode. So next time I'm in Battersea, I'm going to definitely remember the video. That's
it. Lovely. One thing I was going to talk about was we talked about the horns in the song, some of the songs, which I thought were fantastic. The group that played the horns were called the Irish Horns Group, which is fantastic. You hear them in Revolution Rock. Where else do they come out? The Right Profile, you've got the saxophone and the horns as well. And I just thought that was really cool because there's another one. It is The Right Profile. That sounds like a song to me called Everybody Needs Somebody by a soul artist called, what's his name? Solomon Burke, I think it is. Again, I'll find it, guys. It'll be in the playlist. But you know the one, don't you, Felipe? Everybody needs somebody from the Blues Brothers. And it really has that soul and Motown vibe. And then complement that with the horns and the saxophone. This, to me, is where the Clash are taking those American influences from being on tour with Sam and Dave and Bo Diddley.
Yeah. See, it's the kind of stuff that if you're familiar with other genres, you can hear them in the album. But I imagine the typical rock fan at the time might not have noticed,
Yeah. But this is the thing, that they don't go about making it, let's write a soul rock song. No. Let's write a Motown inspired song. These are just things that I think I don't know. I think I don't want to sound arrogant, but I feel very lucky to have my ears because I really just naturally hear things. I can pick out things that I'm not saying others can't. They become very apparent to me from the moment I hear it. I can pick out certain things. Oh, that's a heavy metal rhythm. Oh, that's like a Motown drum beat. And I love that I can do this because I feel that I can hear where a song has come from. But as we've said, the package is then produced by The Clash and given to us as a new wave punk rock song that actually only to weird people like me comes across as a Motown inspired, but it's a different kind of song again, isn't it? A punk rock song with horns and saxophone.
Yeah, exactly. Well, did you notice the Bo Diddley beat on Hateful?
I didn't.
There you go. There's a It happens on the song.
Oh,
Yeah,
brilliant.
the fourth song of the album, the first album,
Good
right?
spot, man. I
Yeah,
missed that. No, I
which is
missed
a
that.
great song. It's a great song about drugs. They say, like drugs are basically saying that they enjoy it, but they hate the fact they're not for free. You gotta pay for them, So that's what the song is all about. So that's what's hateful about it. And they have this Bo Diddley beat, which I actually put on my notes to ask you if you'd notice it, because I don't think it's that evident. It's
I
just
didn't.
hidden there. It's
Good
just there.
spot. Good spot,
Yeah,
man.
interesting. And there's another one which I found completely unexpected on the song "I'm Not Down." Right at the end of the album,
Yeah.
there's a Bayonne groove, which is
That's Brazilian, isn't
boom,
it?
ba, boom, boom, ba, boom, boom, ba. It's a Brazilian rhythm, and
Okay.
it happens at the end of the album. So being Brazilian, I recognize I used to play this kind of music. And
Brilliant.
I don't know if they did it intentionally or if it's just something that sounds like it.
Who
It's
knows?
loads of that song's got loads of different parts. And I think that only happens on the second verse. And it's one of those things like the whole song is great in many ways.
Yeah.
Specifically this song, "I'm Not Down," apart from the Bayonne groove, which I just mentioned, I really enjoyed the drum fills. I enjoyed the fact they wrote different arrangements for each part of the song.
Mm.
And it's a positive take. It's kind of like, things are difficult, but I'm not down, and I'm kind of like I can still fight.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting thing about that one as well. The first time they played it live, uh, I think Joe Strummer said, "I hope no one is contemplating suicide." And I don't know if it's just being sarcastic or he's just saying, like, you know what, you might be going for going through difficult times, but this song is about, like, you can still make it. And I
Brilliant.
think there's a positive message there.
Yeah.
It's so. I mean, it's really it's one of those albums we can't talk about every single song because
No, too many.
there's 19 songs. One thing I really enjoyed is the song "Death for Glory," again from the second album, which
From the bonus, from the bonus 7
from the
inch.
bonus album, yeah, which is possibly the best chorus, and it's a very simple, straightforward chorus,
Agreed.
and it's essentially pop music. Maybe not the
Well,
best song, but the best chorus.
can I tell you what I've written down for this song? And do you know the song Four Horsemen,
Yeah,
track 16? I really heard some Rolling Stones in it.
interesting, because
Just
I
kind of
found "Lovers Rock" very much like Rolling Stones as well. So two consecutive songs that we
Yeah,
can.
and do you know what? For Lovers Rock, I've got Clapton guitar playing, so it is kind of like that 60s
Yeah,
blues rock thing with the Stones and Clapton. Man, this album's got it all, isn't it? For a 1979 album, it literally has kind of taken all the music from the Beatles to 1979 and just sort of picked the best parts and made it into a multifaceted genre style album with punk attitude.
yeah,
Isn't
exactly,
it?
exactly. Man, you really managed to sum it up perfectly. It's what it is, and
Yeah.
it's got everything. And again, I think you said this at some point. It doesn't sound like they're trying to do this.
No.
I think they're just trying to not be essentially a punk band or to
Yeah.
not emulate the sound they did previously. Because the clash for me was, should I stay or should I go?
So for me, it's Rock the Casbah. That's the one I knew of
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
So those are the two songs really that I think that put them in the spotlight at first.
Yeah.
And this album sounds nothing like those two songs. Absolutely nothing like them.
No, it doesn't at all. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, very different styles. Or I'm just talking about those three Clash songs. But yeah, what a band and what an album.
Or
Do
an
you have
album.
anything else to add, bro?
It's the variety of rhythms. We've mentioned Bo Diddley, we've mentioned Brazilian music, we've mentioned jazz, rockabilly.
Rock and roll.
There's some marching band, a snare playing. So there's snare drum doing some marching band kind of vibe. That song,
Jesus.
"The Card Cheat," which it's got a kind of really heavy presence of piano as well, which doesn't happen anywhere else in the album.
Great point,
Not that level. So it's at least unpredictable. When a new song starts, you're like, where the hell are these guys going to take us now?
I completely agree, bro. That's fantastic stuff, man. Do you have anything else to say, or should we
Uh,
finish there?
no, man, I just recommend everyone to listen to it, and maybe listen to this. It just crossed my mind that the album cover is a reference to Elvis's first album, which we reviewed. So, guys, have a listen to that episode,
Yeah.
and listen to those two albums, in sequence, and think about what rock and roll can be about. So rock and roll can be Elvis and can be the Clash. And that's a long journey for one music genre in a matter of a couple of decades, really. And it's
That's
amazing what rock and roll became. And you see the reference on the album cover to a classic rock and roll album, but what they're doing is completely different, but still rock and roll in its essence.
Well, you say that it is completely different in the final product, but if you remember when we spoke about that Elvis thing, Elvis did the same thing, bro. He took the black music from the gospel churches he was visiting. He took some of the early rock and roll from the studio that he was singing at. He took various elements as well and molded them together, just like the Clash have done. So yeah, but that's a great shout, man, especially to go and
So
listen to
maybe
those albums.
stealing the artwork for the cover was very, very intentional in that sense.
Entirely appropriate as well, I think, isn't
Yeah.
it? Fantastic. Bro, let's finish with I'm gonna put you on the spot. Tell me your three favorite songs.
Oh wow. Well, London Calling for sure.
Number one, yeah? Because that's
Yeah.
the same for me as well. What's your number two? What's your second favorite?
Man, I'm gonna go for Jimmy Jazz.
Okay.
I'll
Cool.
tell you the second and the third favorite
Yep.
for the same reason. So it's gonna be Jimmy Jazz and The Right Profile.
Okay. Why?
Because those two songs are about characters. So the first one is about life in general and the city and and the problems. Those two songs are characters. Jimmy Jazz is probably a fictional character and is like a criminal escaping from the police. Everyone's pretended to not, have seen him anywhere, etc., which is a very kind of a mafia style kind of story. And I loved it. And The Right Profile is based on the story, a real story of an American actor called Montgomery Clift. They actually mention his name on it. And he was, addicted to alcohol, drugs, and all that stuff. And he had a car crash in 1956, and then he died in 1966. So after abusing drugs and alcohol. And so it was famously called the longest suicide in Hollywood history. Took 10 years. So that song is about people passing by, seeing the car after the crash and say, oh, that's Montgomery Clift. So
Wow.
that's an interesting real story in one song, a probably fictional character in another song. And London Calling, what can I say about that one?
Yeah.
We've said everything about it. So those three songs for me, it's really hard to pick, but I had those songs in mind.
Since
In terms of lyrics and everything, yeah.
Since it's a 19-song album, we really should have done 5, but I think 3 is good, isn't it?
Yes, no, 3 is good.
My
really
favorite 3.
What are your 3 favorite songs?
So, London Calling, number 1. I genuinely think it might be one of the best songs ever written. In terms of what it stood for, when we're talking about things like, A Day in the Life by the Beatles, trying to think of which Pink Floyd one I choose, Echoes, do you know what I mean? Like, well, each band, like the Beatles, Pink Floyd, the Kinks, the Rolling Stones, they've got some really famous songs that stand out. And I think this is one of them. London Calling just sits up there with the elite of the elite in terms of British pop songs. I know it's a punky song, but it is popular. Number 2, I've got The Card Cheat. I really, really enjoyed the piano. It just took me by surprise, and it took me in a lovely Brit poppy direction I just didn't expect. Number 3, The Guns of Brixton. Burning and Looting by Bob Marley is one of my favourite songs, and this really took me back to it. And I love political lyrics when they have an impact.
Yeah.
When they actually make you think. I sat there and I listened to it for the first time and I went, shit, like that's bad. Obviously, I'm all for freedom of speech and everything. But when I heard them say, you can bruise us, you can beat us, but if you, whatever, you're going to have to answer to the Guns of Brixton. That's literally a message to the police saying, try and hit us, but we're going to shove guns in your face if you try. And I thought, hold on, like, and nowadays you'd be cancelled for that, wouldn't you, if you were to release
Yeah.
lyrics like that? So yeah, they're my favourite three songs.
And
What
that's the one
overall?
thing as well. I think rock and roll, at least back in the day, rock and roll wasn't afraid of talking about any subject. If you're in a rock and roll band, you want to go political, just go and do it. And you want to talk about, drugs, you talk about them, that's fine. Or you want to talk about relationships. So that's it. You just do whatever you want to do. And that's very clear throughout the whole album. They did what they wanted to do. And we've said this many times in this show, isn't it? Most of the classic albums happened with the band 100% in control of the artistic process.
Yeah. And you're going to hear this. You ready for my monologue?
Oh, man, it's my favorite part, always.
So for new listeners and viewers, I do a little monologue at the end of the show where after I've done all my research, I just write all my thoughts down into a few paragraphs and I give Felipe my monologue at the end. So here we go. I'm not a huge fan of traditional punk and so have steered clear of this album for what I now know to be way too long. But The Clash and this album seem to be the catalyst between the Sex Pistols' traditional punk sound and the new wave of punk that came in the 80s with bands like U2. The sheer variety of genres we are hearing that have taken the form of British post-punk is something quite staggering. Reggae, rock and roll, rockabilly, R&B and pop with an underlying punk attitude and sound results in a record that actually sounds way ahead of its time, despite the roots and age of all those styles that I've listed. When you forego the expectations that fans lay on you and let a band experiment in their own time and at their own leisure, then you can really create something remarkable and godly. And I say this because I always refer back to our episode about the Animals, where we saw a band who said, right, for this song, we're going to write a blues song. And for this one, we're going to do an R&B song. And subsequently, they then had an obvious blues song and an obvious R&B song. But with The Clash, the unique combination of all of these styles didn't result in this is an obvious reggae song. Even though we do have a few that say, okay, this is mostly ska, or this is a bit rock and roll. It resulted in an overall sound that I can only think was one of the main inspirations for Britpop, because I just cannot get away from this 90s pop sound that's going through the album. Hints of comedy, hints of pop, rockabilly, rock and roll, reggae with an underlying punk and rock and roll attitude. They really made something special here, and I'm actually sad that I didn't listen to this album sooner, as I really enjoyed it. It genuinely sounds like an album made by a band who were enjoying fitting their inspirations and influences into an already established sound, and unintentionally creating a brand new style in post-punk. It's not an album that I would put in my top albums of all time, but I can 100% see and justify why others would. The biggest and best compliment I can give it is that this is the punkiest non-punk album I've ever heard.
Wow. Phenomenal. Well done again, brother.
Thank you. Yeah, I love writing them, man. It's just like getting all your thoughts down into a mini essay. Guys, thank you again for joining us. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We are at Long Live RNR Pod. And then you can follow us there and stay up to date with all the episodes. So once again, thank you for joining.
And yeah, thanks for being with us. Thanks for the new listeners, and thanks to all of you guys who've been following us for a while. And keep on rocking, everyone.
And as usual, take care and long live rock and roll.